Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mostly Nerdy Podcast, the show where we talk mostly about nerd stuff, but sometimes about some other things as well. I'm your host, Rick Curci, and welcome once again to another episode of a Mostly Nerdy Podcast. Here's what I did last week. Last week was the first ever episode, which I appreciate everybody who took the time to watch it. Now, what I was going to do was that I was going to take each individual segment, export it as a separate video, and then upload that. When I did that, though, I just kind of overloaded my own channel, and I looked at it and I really didn't like the fact that I was overloading it with content that technically already existed on the channel. So I'm going to change things up a little bit this time. So I'm going to post over here the segments that this show is going to have, the ones that I actually get to, and down in the video's description, because this is the way YouTube works. I used to be able to put annotations, so if you want to click on each of the segments, you could be taken to that time code, but it doesn't work like that anymore. So down in the description, I'm going to put in each of those segments and the time code. So you could just hopefully click the time code, find the time code, whatever, and you should be taken to that segment. But here are all the topics that I will be talking about today in this episode. So let's go and talk about some movies first. So we found out earlier this week that Avengers Endgame would be seeing a re-release in theaters, and that would be running from June 28th, which would be next Friday, and it'll be running until the following Sunday, June 30th. So it's a very short window. Just for this weekend, we will be seeing a re-release for Avengers Endgame. Now, this is supposed to be including additional scenes. Now, I thought that, and I was like, oh man, what scenes are being included? How much longer is the movie going to be? But apparently, they're not changing the movie as the core movie. Because then you run into the risk of you start adding things in and then you throw up the pace. Because I think one of the biggest critiques that Avengers Endgame had was in the beginning, it's a little slow before it gets to the second and third acts where it starts to pick up and the interesting stuff starts happening. I love that movie all the way through. I think that a lot of what happens in the first act is in reaction to what happened in the previous movie. So I thought that all that stuff was put there and done well. But the problem is when you start adding in scenes to that, then you threaten the idea of throwing off the pacing, or in this case, making that first act, which already critically was seen as kind of slow, but now you're making it even slower. So I think that the better route, which is what they're doing, is to not mess up the flow of the movie that already has been phenomenally well received. Instead, what they're going to do is that they're going to put these scenes during the credits. So we're getting some credit scenes, which previously we didn't. If you saw Avengers Endgame, there was no post-credit scene. There was a little sound effect that they played at the end, but there was no scene. There was no teaser for the next thing. There was no little nod or joke that they threw in there. It was just nothing other than the sound effect. So this time they're apparently adding in 3 things. And so those 3 things are, one, a deleted scene, which a lot of people have been speculating as to what that deleted scene could be. Now, I hope that it doesn't really, it's not a deleted scene that could have been in the movie. I don't want to get to the credits and then we start seeing a deleted scene that should have been in the middle of the movie. Here's an action beat between Hulk and Thanos. I would have loved that, and I'm sure I would love to see that, but it wasn't in the movie, so therefore don't put it in the credits, just put it in the movie. But I don't know if that's what they're going to do. I think they're going to take a deleted scene that works as a post-credit scene. For example, if you look at Thor Ragnarok, the very final post-credit scene to that, at the very end, is the Grandmaster in the junkyard of Sakaar, and then those junkers finding him. And he's like, all right, great rebellion, everybody. Great job. You guys won. You guys did a great job. That's a funny little scene that I think could have really been in the movie, technically. But it works as a post-credit scene. Same thing for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, which had several credit scenes. One of them was the Watchers walking away from Stan Lee. So I think that also could have worked in the movie. Then there's a couple of other movies that have done that, like the shawarma scene, where it's kind of a deleted scene. They just did it as a pickup. It wasn't even in the original script. They just decided to throw it in there. In fact, Chris Evans has his face being blocked by his own hand because he has grown facial hair. So I'm wondering if they do something similar to that, where it's kind of jokey. They originally had it, but they cut it out because the movie was already long enough. So now they're just kind of adding it in there, and it works as a post-credit scene. Some people are speculating that maybe it's Michael Pena and Paul Rudd meeting up And then it has that Michael Pena character. What's his name? Ruiz? Luis? I forget what his actual name is in the movie of Ant-Man. But he does like these cool retelling of certain stories, but he kind of like gives too many details than he should. And people are wondering if maybe he's going to be doing that, but recounting the events of the entire MCU or the events of the movie or whatever. I don't know if that's what we're going to end up seeing, but I would 100% be on board for it because those scenes are always entertaining. So that's just one. It's a deleted scene, and we're not sure exactly what it is, but I kind of hope it works as a post-credit scene, and it's not just something that easily was lifted from the middle of the movie or from an action beat in the movie and threw in here, because then I just wish it was over there. Now, there is a tribute. Now, I think the easy answer is that it could be a tribute to Iron Man. It could be a tribute to one of the other characters. But I think that this is a tribute to Stan Lee, because I think that's the obvious route to go here, is that Stan Lee was the big loss that all Marvel fans suffered this past year. And we do get his post-credit scene in the movie, which at the theater that I was at, I went to go see it on the Friday it released. I didn't see it the Thursday before, but still the theater I was at was pretty active. And when Stan Lee came on, it erupted in applause. And I feel like this little tribute would be very nice for him. I don't know what that tribute would be. I don't know if it's legitimately a behind the scenes, here's a tribute to Stan Lee, or if it's something along the lines of maybe it was a couple of the other deleted, not really deleted, but unused scenes that he might have shot for cameo purposes that just didn't get into those movies or whatever. I don't know if we're going to see any more Stan Lee cameos. I think from this point forward, what we're going to start getting is well, if you ever watch like the Netflix Marvel stuff, which I know Jessica Jones just came out. I haven't watched it yet, so we're not going to talk about it today. But if you ever watch some of the Netflix stuff or even any of the TV Marvel stuff, they always have a Stan Lee cameo, or it's more of like an Easter egg. It's not a cameo, but it's always like a poster or a picture or a mural. That's what I think we're going to start getting from Marvel in the future, is that you will always see Stan Lee's face in a Marvel movie forever from this point forward, period. I know that they said that they've like scanned his face in so that they can recreate it. I don't know if that's the better route to go about it. Like, I know that he's recorded lines and everything, and I'm sure he's said multiple times, like, in the event of my death, I would be totally fine if you guys did this. I don't know if I would want that. I think the little nod of like a poster here and there, just something in the background where Marvel fans will catch it if they're really looking. I just think that that's the better route. But I think that's the tribute. Now the surprise, I'm not sure what the surprise is. I'm thinking, if I were to make a guess, it leads into Spider-Man, which is going to be releasing the following week, and I think that's the easiest build up to it. Marvel's not really talking beyond Spider-Man Homecoming. Or I'm sorry, not Spider-Man Homecoming, Spider-Man Far From Home. They're not talking about Phase 4, but I think that either they're saving that for San Diego Comic-Con, where they're going to do what they did for Phase 3 and have like this big event where they reveal all the slates and all the dates, and here's what we are working on. Here's what Phase 4 looks like. I am going to go out on a limb here. I don't think they're going to do this, but I would 100% be on board for it if they did. I hope that the surprise is the reveal of the Phase 4 slate of, here is Black Widow, here are all the sequels to all these other films, and some big surprises as well of, here are all the movies that we're doing. Thank you guys for being fans. This is what the surprise is. I don't know if that's what we're going to end up getting. I think that's a personal hope for mine, just because I want to know what Phase 4 looks like. So I'm really looking forward to that reveal event that I think is going to happen realistically at Comic-Con this year. So I think the surprise is actually a little tease towards Spider-Man Far From Home. Now, look, let's look at this exactly for what it is. This re-release of Avengers Endgame is an attempt on Marvel's part to boost Avengers Endgame to break the highest grossing movie of all time record currently held by Avatar. Now, I looked up the numbers here. Avatar, which was released in 2009, saw a total grossing of $2.787 billion. $2.787 billion. And that's after 34 weeks in theaters. Now, Avengers Endgame, in just 8 weeks, accumulated almost just as much. But they accumulated a total, at this point, when I looked, $2.7 $744 billion. Now, that is $43 million short of the record. That's the difference here, is $43 million. This re-release for this one weekend, adding in some new teases, some new things at the end, it's all an attempt to just get it up there. Now, look, let's look at these numbers for what they are. Avatar, I like that movie. And at the time, in 2009, its visual effects were pretty spectacular. It was a very pretty movie. And I think it did something along the lines of CGI effects that hadn't been done to that scale before. But then when you look at the amount of time that it was in theaters for to accumulate that total number, but then at the same time, the reviews for it, I think it's a good movie and I like it. I think it's a little overrated. Just a little bit. Because now we got 4 or 5 million different sequels for Avatar planned out. I am on board for one, maybe even a third, one sequel or another sequel. A 2 and a 3. I was getting confused by the numbers there, but we're with it right now. We're on the same page. But all these other sequels, these 4 or 5 Avatar sequels, I don't know if I'm on board for all of them. I'm just on board for do an Avatar 2 that leads into an Avatar 3. But then that's also the mistake that a lot of movies make as well. Like Pirates of the Caribbean made that mistake. They made one, and as a standalone, that one's great. Avatar, same thing. As a standalone, it's really good. But then they tacked on 2, which leads into a third. And I hate when movies do that. I hate when movies are like, it's a trilogy, but the first one is just kind of, it's kind of separate, and 2 and 3 are like, you gotta watch them back to back. And I hate when movies do that. I don't like that. And that's what I feel like Avatar is gonna be for these next 1,100 million movies. It's a little overrated. And in my opinion, considering how long it was in theaters for, I don't know if it is deserving of that highest grossing movie record anymore. I feel like for the time, that's fine, but it's held the title for 10 years now. I feel like we need a new champion. And Avengers Endgame is deserving of that, because Avengers Endgame isn't just one movie that had spectacular visual effects and was in was in theaters for a ridiculous amount of time. This is a movie that is the culmination, is a conclusion for 10 years, 11 years of buildup from 20 plus other movies. This is something, a cinematic, never been done before thing. And I feel like it, just because of everything that it did and how the movie actually was, it's deserving of the title. And it was just there. In just 8 weeks, it was right there. So a lot of people kept asking me, do you think that if they do the re-release that maybe the fact that it gets the record after the re-release, that maybe it's kind of like it couldn't do it on its own. And I'm like, well, Avatar did it on its own, but after 34 weeks, which is how I don't feel like doing the math right now, but how many months is that? Oh, you know what? I'll do it real quick. Let's see. What's 34 divided by 4? That's 8.5 months. Almost 9 months in theaters. Over half a year in theaters. And that's the number that you pull up, because it was, there was interest and it made money, obviously. I just feel like at this point, Avengers Endgame is more deserving of the title. And it was almost there. So it's like, let's just boost it. Let's just get it in there. Let's just do it. Who cares? So I'm really interested, because I know a lot of people were asking me, are you going to go see this? Actually, somebody texted me. They were like, I didn't know about it until a buddy of mine texted me, and he goes, are you going to go see it? I was like, hell yeah, I'll go see it. I was like, I'll do my due diligence as a fan and just help them just a little bit more. I need an excuse. I've already seen the movie twice already, but let me go again, go see it a third time. I saw Infinity War 3 times, so I feel like it's only fair that I see Endgame 3 times. So I'll go see what these post credits are. And if that means that my $10-15, whatever, depending on if I do IMAX or not, if that's how much money it takes and I do my due diligence and help them reach the record, then I feel like I've done it. That's all I'm going to say about the Avengers Endgame re-release. I'm very excited for it. Really interested to see what the new stuff is, but I do really, really hope that they get that record, because I feel like they deserve it. Actually, speaking of Marvel, I kind of want to pivot over to, let's talk a little bit more specifically about the Marvel's Phase 4, which is a topic I have spoken about before, but I'm not going to make any speculations as far as things that we might get. I just want to talk about the things that we could pretty much bet that we will be getting. So Black Widow is a movie that was heavily rumored for a long time. It was happening, then it wasn't happening, then it was happening, then it wasn't happening. Now currently filming. So the question going into this movie is, what exactly are we expecting to get from this movie? Like, what time period is it in? I think the easy answer is that it's a prequel. It's Black Widow when she was first getting started, when she was an assassin, because if you look at the comics, Black Widow originally debuted as a villain. So we never really got to see villain Black Widow, and I've always been interested in seeing villain Black Widow. So I kind of want to go into this movie and see her, not so much training, but just her in her prime. And maybe we see the interaction between her and Hawkeye. We hear all the time about Budapest, but we never have seen what Budapest was, what happened there. Because apparently, like, every time something crazy happens, they look at each other and they're like, not quite like Budapest, huh? Or it is like Budapest. Like during the Battle of New York, she goes, this is like Budapest all over again. And he's like, you and I remember Budapest very differently. So I want to know what Budapest was. What happened between her and Hawkeye in Budapest? Like, tell me what happened. That's one theory for the Black Widow movie. The other one is that it's a side story that happened during the MCU. But I think in Avengers Endgame, this is not so much a spoiler, but during Avengers Endgame, there was a 5-year time jump. You know, it picks up immediately after, well, I think about like maybe what is it, a month or a week or so after Avengers Infinity War. There's a little bit of a time difference there, but there is immediately after Infinity War and then a 5-year jump. And I kind of want this movie to be based within that 5-year gap, because during that time we saw in Endgame that Black Widow kind of fulfilled the role as a leader of the Avengers. And I kind of want to explore that. Like, put us in those 5 years. Show us how the world adapted to the realization of everybody just died, or at least half of everybody did. And now how does the world react to it? I'm sure the world would have turned to the Avengers. Like, what happened when the Avengers said, yeah, we tried and we failed. We don't know how to fix this anymore. So maybe we see what Black Widow was dealing with. Also, we didn't get a whole lot of Hawkeye as Ronin in Avengers Endgame. There was a little bit of it, but there wasn't a whole lot of focus on the Ronin character. So I kind of want to treat this movie as a way of them, like, Black Widow knows that Hawkeye, Clint, has been taking the loss of his family kind of not well, and he's gone into the persona of Ronin. And I feel like this movie exploring that 5-year gap could also explore that. Like, even if you take the Black Widow movie and Ronin is the villain, Hawkeye is the villain, and it's just her dealing with the Avenger stuff, dealing with the loss, but also dealing with him, dealing with his loss. And how do you end that? Like, what's the interaction? Because she knows about him in the movie, because they mention it, and she's just like, she gets emotional and she doesn't want to talk about it, where she does want to deal with it because she wants to know if she can bring him back. But you know it's painful when she talks about it. So those are some of the theories for the Black Widow movie. I think they got David Harper, who's the guy from Stranger Things and Hellboy. He's in the movie in some capacity. But I think that the safer bet is that it is going to be a prequel. It is going to be going over the early days of Black Widow, how she was recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D., and then also Budapest. I think that would be very interesting, but I kind of want to see the 5-year gap of Black Widow dealing with everything as the leader of the Avengers. So that's Black Widow. Now, we also have the Eternals. Admittedly, I don't know a lot of the Eternals. As a DC fan, I look at the Eternals and I'm like, that's basically the New Gods, right? It's these higher, super powerful cosmic beings. And this is a way for Marvel to continue to expand their world, because they've always wanted to go further and further with the cosmic stuff, but they never actually, beyond Guardians of the Galaxy and Captain Marvel, really got bigger. You know what I mean? Like, much more cosmic. Like, I think the most cosmic that they got was with Thanos, with the Infinity Stones, but I think that there's a way that we could really dive into it, and I think the Eternals is a first step into what that next thing is going to be. And that next thing could possibly be more of exploring the different realms. They talk about Annihilus as a possible villain for the future. I mean, I've talked about Annihilus trying to predict what possibly could be happening in Avengers Endgame. But I think that the Eternals is a very important step to really bursting the door open into the next stage of what Marvel is going to end up being. Speaking of cosmic, we talk about Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, now with 100% more Thor, who is definitely going to be joining the cast following the events of Avengers Endgame. This movie was originally supposed to be the next movie that came out after Spider-Man Far From Home, but there was a whole lot of controversy surrounding James Gunn. If you don't remember, I will recap it very quickly here. James Gunn made some tweets years ago, and they were less than stellar tweets. They were jokes that really aren't that funny, really unprofessional. And he has since apologized for those tweets and has moved on with his life. He was recruited to be a part of Guardians of the Galaxy in the MCU. And then somebody found those tweets, brought them back up, and then Disney found out they fired James Gunn. So James Gunn gets fired, and then there was, because of that, the search for finding a new writer and director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 gets delayed. And then there was this whole controversy of, okay, well, the cast is starting to be upset with us because of the fact that we fired James Gunn. They only really want to work with James Gunn. Dave Bautista being one of the forerunning, one of the people that were really at the front of objecting to the firing and wanting the rehiring of James Gunn. And now since then, James Gunn has gone on to work on other projects, Brightburn being one of them, but also got brought on board of the DC universe to work on Suicide Squad 2. Now, since that has all happened, James Gunn has been rehired by the MCU and is reinstated as the director of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. So the movie is back on track to a point, but now it's being delayed even further because now they have to wait for James Gunn's other commitments to finish up before we get to Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Now, that's the controversy and the drama surrounding that movie. But moving forward, what could this movie include? And I think that the easy answer is Adam Warlock, because they've teased him in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. Now, Adam Warlock was, in the comics, plays a huge role in the Infinity War arc. And he was the one that ultimately gets the gauntlet from Thanos and undoes everything. In Avengers Endgame, they play on that a little bit. Adam Warlock is obviously not there. But Adam Warlock was still teased during a post-credit scene in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. So clearly that's the future going forward with this movie. So I think that for Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, we're going to get more Adam Warlock, possibly seeing him as the villain. And then obviously we're going to get more Thor. Thor has joined the cast of Guardians of the Galaxy, which continues with the reinvigorated life that character has, because he used to be very uptight, but now he's gotten a lot more jokey and laid back, which Chris Hemsworth has said that he will continue to play the character forever as long as he continues to do that interpretation of the character. And as far as audiences go, people like that type of Thor. Now, personally, I feel like maybe that Thor is a little too jokey, but I do find entertainment in it. So I do see the success for it. If right now it's working, and if it's not broke, why fix it? So then we go to some of the other easier 3 sequels, which is Spider-Man 3. Now, I think Spider-Man 3 is, I think what they're doing is they're starting to put together the rogues gallery for Spider-Man villains. Because already from Spider-Man Homecoming, we had Vulture, we had Shocker, and we had Scorpion. And now in this new one, we have, obviously, Mysterio. I don't know who else they're going to be introducing, but I'm wondering if they're building toward a Sinister Six. And I'm wondering if that's going to be the plot for a Spider-Man 3, or if the Sinister Six is being built up for a possible Spider-Man 4, or for another sort of team-up movie where, like, okay, well, we've always had the team-up heroes. Well, let's see the villains team up and see how they deal with, like, the Avengers versus the Sinister Six. I think I would actually be more interested in the latter of those two things, but the Sinister Six has typically fought against Spider-Man. Now, this is a storyline that has been explored recently with the PS4 Spider-Man game. The Sinister Six were the what am I trying to say? The accumulation of that entire story. Everything was building toward that. I think it could work. I don't know if that's where they're going, but I think that a Sinister Six is the future in the MCU, that they will eventually do a Sinister Six. And I think either in Spider-Man 3, it will be the culmination of that, or we're going to see the birth of that. In Spider-Man 3, we see the creation of the Sinister Six that will come in later films. The other three is obviously Ant-Man 3. I don't know a ton about the Ant-Man character to really kind of make a guess as far as where or what that movie could entail. I could say the same thing about Black Panther, but there is no way in hell that they're going to not do a Black Panther 2. I think that the first Black Panther did extremely well. I think the character has an incredible fan base behind it now. It would be dumb for you to not do a Black Panther 2. 100% they're going to do a Black Panther 2, and it's going to happen in Phase 4. Speaking of other sequels, Doctor Strange 2. At the end of Doctor Strange 1, we get the post-credit scene of Mordo going bad. Because he doesn't like what happened in the first Doctor Strange movie. He feels betrayed by the Ancient One. He's kind of lost faith in everything that he's built up his entire life as a sorcerer. And at the post-credit scene that we see in Doctor Strange 1, he's kind of turning on the sorcerers because he feels like there's too many of them. And so I feel like in the sequel, we're going to start to see Doctor Strange versus Mordo, who has always been his arch nemesis. So I feel like we're going to see more of that. I'm also going to go ahead and throw this one out there. I don't think we've seen the last of Dormammu, because I think Dormammu has, and this is actually kind of leading into Avengers Endgame. I'm going to do a little spoiler for Avengers Endgame. It happens right at the beginning of the movie, so it's not too spoilery. But if you remember in Doctor Strange 1, the way he defeats Dormammu is not by punching the crap out of him and defeating him. Dormammu is still very much there. He makes a deal with him. And he being Doctor Strange, obviously. So Doctor Strange makes a deal with Dormammu to take Mads Mikkelsen and his other zealots away from the world and allowing this Earth to be left alone. And then he's able to rebuild the Sanctum with the Time Stone, and the balance is restored. But at the same time, the way Doctor Strange makes that deal is that he takes the Time Stone, the Infinity Stone, and he introduces time to a realm that it does not exist in. And that's how he's able to basically trap Dormammu and then make a deal with him. But here's the kicker. In the beginning of Avengers Endgame, this is the spoiler I was talking about, so if you haven't seen the movie, which, by the way, this is why I'm not that worried about spoilers for Endgame anymore. The Time Stone's not a thing anymore. The Time Stone got destroyed in Avengers Endgame. And now in the world that we follow, the MCU, that universe, no longer has any Infinity Stone, including the Time Stone. So now that the Infinity Stones have been taken out of the equation, Dormammu might feel the need to, or might feel like, okay, well, now you ain't got nothing. Your one weapon against me was the Time Stone, and now you don't have it anymore. So guess what? I'm going to come back, bitch. So I feel like we're going to get more Dormammu in the future. I don't know if it's going to be in Doctor Strange 2, because I don't think that they should be redoing the same villain in the sequel. But I think Mordo is going to be in the sequel as the main villain. Dormammu might be coming in for a Doctor Strange 3, or perhaps we could see Dormammu coming in at a later, like, Avengers movie or something. Because, again, they're trying to expand the universe, and Dormammu is an interdimensional thing. So this is another step in expanding the universe. So I don't think we've seen the last of Dormammu. Now, of course, we got Captain Marvel 2. A lot of people critically weren't a huge fan of Captain Marvel. I had a lot of fun with that movie. I thought Brie Larson did a fine job. You can make whatever conclusion you want as far as Captain Marvel herself, Brie Larson herself, I should say. I thought she did a fine job. Like, I don't let what the actors do in their own time, assuming that they don't commit murder or anything too terrible like that. But I'm hoping that I can kind of remove myself from that and just watch the movie as it is. And I feel like Captain Marvel 2 would be something very interesting for Phase 4, because one of the things that they build up in the first Captain Marvel is the Supreme Intelligence and the Kree Empire. And they kind of build up this idea that Captain Marvel is going to have some sort of throwdown with them, and she hasn't had it yet. Now, Captain Marvel, the movie, takes place in the 90s. I don't know the exact year. I forgot to look that up, to be honest. But the current MCU right now exists in the year 2023. So this is like several decades into the future here since the first Captain Marvel. And I have to wonder, has Captain Marvel not interacted with the Kree Empire since then? I feel like if we get a Captain Marvel 2, that it will take place like going back. Like it'll be in like the early 2000s or something. So, but I feel like there's going to be a throwdown with the Supreme Intelligence that we didn't get in the first Captain Marvel that we will get in the sequel. And then, of course, there's obviously this whole idea of the X-Men and the Fantastic Four joining the MCU, because the Fox-Disney merger happened. It's official. And we haven't seen the culmination of it. I know a lot of people went into Avengers Endgame expecting some sort of tease, and I was like, no, you're not going to get it, because we're not going to get any X-Men movies or Fantastic Four movies for quite some time. There's still a couple of things that they need to figure out in terms of deals or whatever, but you're not going to start to see any of that stuff until a little bit later. Now, there is always this question of how they're going to do it. Are they going to just multi-universe it and just drag them over, or are they going to find some way of building them into the universe starting now? In my opinion, I think that, again, I like the idea of the Mind Stone exploding and then forcing the X gene in all mutants around the world to be triggered. So in Infinity War at the end, when the Mind Stone is destroyed by Scarlet Witch, it's ultimately reversed, but it's still destroyed at one point. I think that is a way that they can use it to trigger X-Men across the world. But I still don't think we're going to be getting any of those movies anytime soon. But it doesn't mean that we can't get some of those characters. I think that we've already gotten a tease into Namor, which apparently, again, the Marvel has always kind of had the Namor property, even though technically he's a mutant, and so technically he's an X-Men. But he's a character that really didn't belong to Fox, kind of belonged to Universal. And the same deal that the Hulk brings into the MCU, the same deal is applied to Namor, because the MCU doesn't have the full movie rights to the Hulk. They can use the character however they want, but we can't make a Hulk movie anymore because of distribution rights, and Universal doesn't want to play nice with Marvel. Namor's in that same boat. So, but they can still use Namor, and they got a little bit of a tease for it in Endgame when they talked about earthquakes in the ocean, and a lot of people were like, oh, Namor. But I also think that we could see like Storm in a future Black Panther movie. Again, Storm was married to Black Panther in the comics at one point. I think that you could see a Wolverine in some sort of flashback into Captain America thing. I mean, they're going to be doing Falcon and Bucky, or Falcon and Winter Soldier, whatever. It's that Disney Plus series that is MCU related. I think you're going to see that. That could be a way that they could include Wolverine. But there are so many X-Men characters that you could honestly just pepper them in anywhere, and it would totally make sense. Like, I don't think it's that hard to be, now that we've had the deal, to turn around and be like, you know what, we're going to take this character and we're going to just throw them in, and then there they are. And I heard a lot of people rumored that Dave Harper was going to be fulfilling that role in a future, in the Black Widow movie, as far as he was going to be an X-Men, like he was going to be a Reed Richards or something. Like he was going to be like a Fantastic Four. Or no, I'm sorry, not Reed Richards. He was going to be Ben. I can't remember the actual name of the thing, but a lot of people were saying that that's who he is. You know, it's seeding early into Fantastic Four now that they have the rights. And I think that that's a very easy way that they can start bringing in those characters and then slowly build towards something else. So that's really the Marvel Phase 4 that I'm very much looking forward to. I don't know if they're going to be doing any more Avengers movie, or they're going to find some other incarnation of a team-up movie. Or maybe, honestly, and I know this is not what people want to hear, but maybe they're kind of over the team up. Maybe they just want to keep making these stories that are interconnected and characters will cross over, but they're going to be telling standalone stories of like, okay, we're going to be doing here's the Captain Marvel thing, here's the Doctor Strange thing, here's the Black Panther thing, here's the Spider-Man thing, and everybody's going to have their own journey going forward. I don't know if we're going to be getting any more Avengers movies, because without with a lot of these cast members moving on, Chris Evans, Robert Downey Jr., I don't know if you're still going to get the same vibe. I think that this universe has grown to a point where maybe they don't need that anymore, especially when you look at some of the Spider-Man Far From Home trailers where it's focusing on finding the next Iron Man. Is Spider-Man the next Iron Man? It's interesting, I don't think that we're really going to know until they start talking about officially Phase 4. I think that whenever they do have this event where they reveal the slate for Phase 4, if they don't mention an Avengers movie, odds are we're never going to get an Avengers movie ever again. But I don't know if that means that we're going to get some newer type of a team-up movie, like we're going to get the Illuminati or the X-Men are going to serve as a team-up movie. Or are we just done with that? And these movies are just going to move on to do their own thing. Who knows? But that's pretty much all that I'm going to say as far as Marvel goes. I realized something, though, because I know a lot of people are aware that I'm a huge Aladdin fan, and I didn't really get a chance to talk about it in a video before. So I kind of want to take some time to talk about Aladdin. I saw Aladdin, and I love the original. I grew up in a Disney household. My family are Disney fans. And I'm not just talking about like we only like the classics or we only like the newer stuff. We like pretty much everything Disney. And we have always loved the fact that they've been doing live adaptations. Here's the thing, though. I know that there's this big thing about remakes that people don't like. People don't like remakes because they feel like, oh, don't touch the original. The original's fine. And I'm like, they're not touching the original. The original is still going to be there and it's still going to be great. If Aladdin came out and Aladdin was hot garbage, I could still always go back to the animated and be like, well, there it is. It's completely unchanged. I love it exactly how it is. We'll talk about Child's Play in a second, but the same thing could be said about Child's Play. If you don't like this new remake, you still got the 88 version, the original version, and all the other sequels. I think there's 8 sequels, or I think there's 8 in total, maybe so. The original and then 7 sequels. Here's the thing about the live action Aladdin. I expected it to be not that great, or I expected to be overly critical of it. I had a lot of fun with that movie. Like, there was nostalgia that they were hitting the nostalgia button all over the place. I enjoyed the hell out of Aladdin. And I know that there was this big concern about Will Smith, and I think that one of the bigger concerns, because I've talked to people about it, is that they wouldn't be able to unsee Will Smith in the role. Now, for me, I'm able to kind of remove myself from that, even if I see a really recognizable person in a specific role that I can, like, it doesn't distract me that it's Will Smith. I thought Will Smith was the best part of this movie. I thought he killed it as the genie. Now, then that comes accompanied with the question of, okay, who did better, Robin Williams or Will Smith? And I don't think that's a fair question. I think that these are two different interpretations of the character. You got Will Smith and you got Robin Williams. Neither is better than the other, but they're not really that comparable either. Now, I think ultimately Robin Williams own that role. If I think of Genie, you're going to think of the Robin Williams interpretation. But I don't think that Will Smith did a bad job. I thought he did a great job. He made the character his own, because that's the other thing too, is that I was worried that he was going to do an impression of Robin Williams, but he kind of goes and does his own thing. This is a different Genie. I'm going to say the same thing about Jafar, because Marwan Kenzari, when he was casted, I didn't like it, because I was like, he's not young. He's not... I'm talking about Jafar. Jafar is not young. He's not good looking. In the movie, he's supposed to be an older, kind of ugly looking dude. Now, when you look at the animated, he is very sinister looking. Like, he looks like a bad guy. And I realized you couldn't do the same exact thing, because he is a very cartoony character. Like, he's overly evil. But I've loved that character. I was Jafar several times for Halloween, but not even for Halloween. I was Jafar year round. We had a little closet when I was a kid. It was all for our old Halloween costumes and everything. I would dive into that costume. Jafar would come out. I had the snake staff and everything. I love Jafar. And I maintain that Jafar is my favorite Disney villain of all time. Personally. I'm not saying he is. I'm saying, in my opinion, that is my favorite. Marwan Kenzari, though, is a Jafar, just not the Jafar. You can say the same thing about Will Smith. He is a genie, he is not the genie. You know what I mean? So when I look at Jafar in the live action Aladdin, it is a different interpretation of the character. Marwan Kenzari does his own thing. He is way younger than I would have liked Jafar to be. He doesn't look like Jafar. And when he was on screen, I didn't feel like he was. I feel like Marwan Kenzari as Jafar was probably the weakest part of the movie. But I still think that he did a reasonably fine job creating his own version. They gave a lot of backstory into Jafar that I actually really appreciate. They take a lot of time to kind of go over with him why he is the way that he is, things that he has been through. They don't really do that in the animated version. But Marwan Kenzari actually does an okay job, especially because early on in the movie, I should say, when I saw the trailers for the movie, I looked at it and I said to myself, every time he's talking to Aladdin, where he's trying to convince Aladdin to go into the Cave of Wonders and get the lamp. So he's kind of talking like, I have an opportunity for you. So I'm thinking to myself, well, maybe he's putting on that voice because he's trying to pull Aladdin in. But then in the movie, when we get away from those scenes and he still talks like that, immediately I was like, okay, Rick, turn your brain off. He's not going to be anything close to the animated version. So what we're going to want to do here is we're just going to have to remove our mind from it and accept the fact that this is a newer interpretation. So when I was able to get away from that, I was able to appreciate the character in a way. Now, looking at the overall movie, man, it's fun. Man, it's good. As an Aladdin fan and as somebody that would be overly critical of it, I had a lot of fun with this movie. Like, so much. Naomi Scott kills it as Jasmine. She has an incredible singing voice. She's just awesome. I don't remember the name of the guy who does Aladdin, but I thought he did a fine job. The third act loses me a little bit because during the first and second acts, it keeps pretty true to what the animated did. The songs are great. There are so many times where I would sit in there and I'm just like grinning, like just cheesing. Just Friend Like Me, phenomenal. Prince Ali, oh my God, great. In the third act, though, it does kind of lose me a little bit because that is when Marwan Kenzari is supposed to be owning it up as Jafar. And to me, there's a lot of things that the animated does with the character that does not happen in this one. I don't want to get into spoilers specifically, but there are things that Jafar does in the third act of the animated that he does not do in the live action. And there are two major things that I was really looking forward to that I was very disappointed that weren't there. The third act does lose me because of the fact that it just feels because it's pretty much all Jafar though. Like, I'm trying to think of another reason why I don't like the third act, but it's pretty much all Jafar. Whether it's things that he does in the animated that he doesn't do in the live action, or just he forgets some of the abilities that he has. For example, I'm not going to get too into it because I want to avoid spoilers here, but there are things that he does leading into the third act that would be super useful if he remembered that he could do that. But he doesn't, and then it allows an action scene to take place. But it's a different kind of action scene than has been in the animated. So the third act loses me a little bit, but overall, I really enjoyed the movie. As a fan of Aladdin, as a fan of the animated, somebody who would arguably be very critical of the live action adaptation, I had a lot of fun with this movie. I've been trying to go see it again. Like I'm like, let me go watch it again. I need to watch it again. I honestly really enjoyed that movie. There are times where I've gone back and have just listened to the songs, like not watched the video because obviously it's not out. You can't watch the video unless you watch like a shitty phone recording that shouldn't have happened anyway. I don't like to support that kind of stuff because they shouldn't be doing it. But I've gone back and just listened to the soundtrack. Just like I just want to listen to Prince Ali again because it's really good. Will Smith, I'm telling you, man, he did a great job. And if he didn't work, then I don't think the movie would have, but he really does in a very different way than Robin Williams. So I would really highly recommend going to see Aladdin. Now, okay, let's get into Child's Play. Because backstory here, right? I was terrified of Child's Play, of Chucky when I was a kid. Like, just the doll was too real. And I hated it. Every time Chucky was on, Chucky was the most terrifying thing. Even my uncle was a big fan of the Child's Play stuff. So he would have like these little Chucky figurines. And every time I saw one, I would just be like, I can't look at it. You have to put something over it. You have to hide it. I went back as an adult. I think it was a year ago because I watched it for Halloween, or rather in the month of October for Halloween. I watched the original, which came out in 1988, starring Brandon Dorff. Brandon Dorff? Brad Dorff. I'm looking at it and I'm like, that's not right. Brad Dorff. And I'm looking at this movie and I'm like, this movie's funny. Like, the fear factor doesn't hold up. And I think that the movie didn't age well. I still would go back to that movie and find it enjoyable. It's just not as, if you're going to be scared, this movie, I don't think would do it anymore. But it is very real. And this version of the movie, of the character, is very, very different. It's very modernized. So in the original, Chucky is a doll that's possessed by a psychopathic killer. In this movie, he's an AI that malfunctions and then just loses it. And that's really the interesting thing about this movie. I mean, it's not something that hasn't been done before, of a rogue AI getting the wrong idea and then rebelling. They even make that joke in the movie of like, this is every evil robot thing ever. This movie is essentially, what would Chucky be if Chucky was a hacker? Because the idea of the Child's Play movie that has come out now is that he is he's a doll in the same way that he is in the original, where he's a buddy doll, and it talks to you and it's your best friend. But this one's a little bit more modernized. It can connect to the cloud. It can control some of the other things around your house. And because of its ability to connect to the cloud and connect to all these different devices, it can make Chucky a little bit more dangerous. But he is a rogue AI. He malfunctions and he has to learn. And that's one of the more, like, this movie is scary in different ways, because I feel like this movie is a fear of technology more than it is a fear of Chucky himself. The design of Chucky is just bad, because I looked at that and I was like, okay, so they introduced Chucky as a product, as the buddy doll. The buddy doll is the product. And I'm looking at it and I'm thinking to myself, that's a terrible design. Like, if you would need to do something that was really less creepy. His eyes are really big. His head is humongous. And I'm like, I would never approve this. If I were a toy designer or somebody that was creating this product, no way that I would have approved that. You got to do something a little bit easier to look at than this thing. It's terrifying. But maybe as a movie, that's the point. As far as the cast, I think the cast did a great job. I love Aubrey Plaza and pretty much anything she does. Mark Hamill, you're not going to get much better than Mark Hamill in terms of voiceover work. I just feel like he wasn't given a whole lot to do in this movie. I was hoping that they would give him a little bit more. But because he's an AI and not a possessed doll that was once a person, that there isn't a whole lot that Chucky says anymore. Chucky just kind of acts. And this movie also far more gory than I expected it to be. Like, Brightburn was the same way. I didn't expect Brightburn to be as gory. Brightburn is far worse in the terms of gory. Like, there are some things where I almost had to divert my eyes when the stuff in Brightburn was happening. The stuff in this movie, not as bad, but definitely, like, the first time something crazy, like, gory happens, very unexpected, because I was like, oh my God, that's how you get me, by the way, is the gory stuff. Like, I don't like the Saw movies, and I think, what was the Eli Roth thing, Green Inferno or something? It's the one where they go into, like, the jungle and then they find an indigenous people that are actually cannibals. Some of the stuff in the Red Band trailer, I couldn't even get through. I never even watched the Red Band trailer for that movie. But yeah, very unexpectedly gory. But overall, I think this movie is entertaining. It has a more than a few funny moments. But also, like, I think that I enjoyed this movie because I enjoyed the original Child's Play. And it's not a great... So here's my problem. This is why I'm struggling to kind of come up with these words here, because the way that I am right now is I'm kind of on this little balancing act Because it's like, on one hand, I enjoyed the movie. I had fun with the movie. I walked out and I was like, yeah, I'm on board for it. And not for nothing, I've been really critical of technology. Like, I'll hear like a weird noise and I'll be like, is Chucky going to be around the corner or something? So if the movie's going to stay with me in some way, this movie did. Because I got in my car to leave the theater and I like checked the back seat. I was like, Chucky ain't back there, is he? And I normally don't do that. I'm normally able to like leave a movie and then be disconnected from it. But for some reason, this one is sticking with me a little bit. Now, I saw the movie earlier today. I don't know if I mentioned that. I know I said again, but I'm mentioning it now. I saw the movie earlier today. And I don't know if it's just like technology's being weird, but I'm like extra like skeptical all of a sudden. But again, like I said, I mean, I don't know if there are a lot of like horror moments. Chucky's very weirdly designed. I don't like the way he's designed. There are some facial animations that he does that, like when Chucky really starts chuckying it up, which that's the other thing too, is that it takes a while for that to start happening. The movie does have a little bit of a slow start. So when Chucky starts doing things that you would want to, or rather that you would expect Chucky to do in this movie, it takes a while to get there. But even his face when he does that in the original, like, he looks menacing. When his eyebrows go down and he looks angry, like that's intimidating. Even I think they brighten up his pupils a little bit. In this one, they make his eyes go just straight red. But even like some of the animation with it, I just don't think that it's to the same effect. Like, he doesn't look intimidating. He's just a doll that's starting to kill people. And that's like the fact that he's a doll, but you know, I enjoyed this movie, but I don't know if it's a movie that I would recommend you go see right now. I feel like this is a movie that if you're bored and you're thinking, yeah, you know what, I kind of want to check out the Child's Play movie, then in that case, I feel like, yeah, you know what, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go to see it. I like this movie. You know what? I'll go ahead and say that I liked it. I know that it's getting kind of mixed reviews right now, but overall, I like this movie. I don't think is it better than the original? No. I think the original is unique in its own way. This is a very different movie. This is a very different interpretation of the character. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's not something that I would recommend you drop everything to go see right now. But it's still something that I feel like if you got nothing else going on, it wouldn't be a bad idea to go ahead and check it out. So that's it. That's Child's Play, which, you know, I walked out enjoying it, but I recognize there were some things. It was a little slow. There were some moments that happened that I was like, you know, but overall, I enjoyed the movie. Let's pivot over to video games as we start to come up to the close of this episode here, because there are some E3 things that I didn't get a chance to talk about for sake of time. I don't want to make that first E3 video. I knew that most of last week's episode was going to be E3 stuff, but I didn't want to go too far over an hour. I think I went about just shy of 10 minutes, but I didn't want to go like 2 hours, you know what I mean? So there were a couple of things in E3 that I kind of want to touch on right now. Some games that originally I had in my notes to talk about in the show. First thing, Blair Witch. When I saw the demo, or rather the trailer for this, I thought it was Outlast 3. And I actually kind of got excited about it. Now, I love Outlast. I wasn't a huge fan of Outlast 2, but I was really looking forward to, if they ever were to do an Outlast 3, that they would take the criticisms of Outlast 2 and apply it and then make a supremely better game. But all of a sudden, and I thought that because the camera came out, and I feel like horror games plus camera equals Outlast. But no, it's Blair Witch, which I didn't expect that at all. It was like they panned out and they showed the logo, and I was like, it's Blair Witch. I just didn't expect it. So I'm really interested to see where that game is going to go. Destroy All Humans is getting a remake. I didn't know about this, but when they started talking about it at E3, I was like, 100% yes. Like, I love Destroy All Humans when that game first came out. I played that game nonstop. There were so many stupid things that I would do in that game. Now, this one seems like it's a remake, but it's not like a remake. I almost think it's more of a remaster than a remake. I think technically speaking, they are rebuilding this game, and therefore it is being a remake. But I think it's more of a remaster. because they're not doing the same thing that Resident Evil 2 did, or the same thing that Final Fantasy 7 is doing, where they're rebuilding the game, giving it a complete graphic overhaul, changing the way that it plays, re-recording the voiceover work. This game is keeping the voiceover work. It's the exact same voiceover stuff, but also at the same time, it's pretty much the same design. It's pretty much the same levels, the way that the levels play out. It's all the same thing. It's just now it's for newer consoles, and it's also graphically boosted. So I wouldn't really consider this a remake. It is, in my opinion, more of a remaster, and it is coming out sometime in 2020. I think it's in the spring. I don't know the exact date or even if it has one. But you know what? I mean, I love Destroy All Humans. 100% I am on board for this remake. Then they have a new Dragon Ball Z game, which is Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. Once again, it's a Dragon Ball Z game that more sticks with like the storyline of the anime, and I was going to say the manga, but I don't know too much about the manga. I assume it's the same thing. But it's an RPG, and I'm looking at this game, and because somebody was like, "What do you think of this?" And I'm like, "It depends on how it plays." And most Dragon Ball Z games that are kind of free roaming don't control that well, and I've kind of gotten away from Dragon Ball Z games because of that, because they don't control well. But looking at Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, it's trying to be more RPG-ish, where you're going around and you're talking to people, and they have the text boxes. The animations aren't great. This is a game that, as a Dragon Ball fan, I would love if. I just don't think that Dragon Ball works as an RPG. You know what I mean? Like all these games that have come out for Dragon Ball, I just don't think that they really land like I would want them to land. But that's Dragon Ball Z Kakarot for those that wanted me to talk about it. Then we got Elden Ring. Now, Elden Ring is a From Software game, and it's also working with George R.R. Martin. So these are two things that I'm really interested in. From Software does a great job of world building, but they don't do a whole lot in the side of story. I'm hoping that Elden Ring is going to be more of like there's going to be a story element, but From Software doesn't really focus on story that much. I never played Sicario, but even from the trailers, it looked like they were doing some sort of narrative element in there. Elden Ring looks great, and I love the fact that we're getting back to the fantasy element of it. Because I actually played Dark Souls for the first time a few months ago, and I loved it. I beat it. I officially beat it. Now, Dark Souls is a game that I have played before in the past, but I never really counted it as me playing it because I never got farther than any one point. Because if you look on YouTube, you will find videos of me playing Dark Souls several times, but it never really got beyond like the third or fourth boss. I never got that much farther. But I recently played Dark Souls, and I went through the entirety of the game and beat it. And I'm really proud of myself for doing that. I feel like a real gamer now. But then that got me onto like a From Software kick. I played a little bit of Bloodborne. I stopped playing it, and then I got into Sea of Thieves, and I really haven't gotten into anything beyond that. But I'm excited for Elden Ring, and I think that what I'm going to do is I don't know if I'm going to go back. I don't know if I'm going to ever go back to Bloodborne right now. I kind of want to because I've heard that a lot of people said it was great, and I was playing it. It was fun, but I kept feeling like I was hitting a wall all the time. So I think I'm just going to take a break. Maybe I go back to Bloodborne, or maybe I'll just check out Elden Ring. I'm just really excited that it's a From Software game that is working with George R.R. Martin, and George R.R. Martin is an incredibly creative human being, and I'm just really interested to see where this game goes. Then we got Borderlands 3. Now, Borderlands 3, I'm not a fan of Borderlands. Aside from Tales from the Borderlands from the Telltale series, which was a Telltale series, I've tried to play Borderlands 1 and Borderlands 2, and it's just not my cup of tea. So I'm talking about it because I don't want people to think that, like, why would Rick not talk about Borderlands 3? It's because I don't enjoy Borderlands. I don't enjoy that style of gameplay of just running around and gathering loot, and I don't like the loot game. And that's what Borderlands is. It's what do they say? A bitch-tillion guns or whatever the hell they say. Like, that's not the game for me. And so while I'm excited that a Borderlands 3 is happening, because I know a lot of people that really enjoy Borderlands that would love the fact that it's coming out, to me, I really couldn't care less. A lot of people say that phrase wrong, by the way. They say, I could care less. And I'm like, well, then that means you care a little bit. I couldn't care less about Borderlands 3, but I'm talking about it. Maybe one day I will go back into Borderlands and it will change my opinion, but right now, I really don't. Then we go to Ori and the Will of the Wisps, which I was very excited about. I loved Ori and the Blind Forest. I can't wait for Ori and the Will of the Wisp. I think the rumor going into E3 that it was going to release the day it was day of E3, which I kind of knew wasn't going to happen, but I was really secretly hoping that it would. No, it's going to come out in February. And I got to wait all the way until February until we get the second Ori game. I loved Ori. You know what, though? And that's part of the reason why I went and played Dark Souls, because Ori and the Blind Forest is a more difficult game, but I love the challenge of it. And Dark Souls for the same reason, man. I love Dark Souls because of the fact that it's challenging but not impossible. Every time you fought a boss, it always felt like you were just there. Like, all I have to do is just do this one thing differently, and then bam, I'm able to do it. And I will be able to overcome this task. And Ori was the same way. Every obstacle, I was like, I'm just there. I just got to keep playing, and eventually it's just going to give. Because you learn from your mistakes. You learn by doing. Of like, oh, I can't do this, but I have to do it this way. So I'm very excited about Ori 2, Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Apparently there's they did Mythic Quest Raven's Banquet, which was a TV show. I don't know why this was at E3. I know Ubisoft did it. It's from a lot of the same people that do Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and I'm just like, does anybody care about Mythic Quest? And the answer is no. No one does. And that's pretty much it for the show. We talked a little bit about some video games, which I didn't know if we were going to have time for, but we did. So yeah, that's it. That's the show. Again, Avengers Endgame re-release. We talked about some Phase 4, Aladdin, Child's Play, and some leftover E3 stuff that I didn't get into last week. And that's it, man. That's the show. That's an hour. Thank you guys so much for watching. As always, I will be back next week, but let me know in the comments what you thought of the topics. Please keep the discussion going because I love conversing with people. So comments down below. I said that weird last week. I think it was, please let me know in the comments down below. But either way, keep the conversation going about any topic. Please talk about it down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you next week.